All right, so here's his poem, Let Me Not to the Marriage of True Mind. So a couple of things about the form, the rules that we have to follow. So sonnets are 14 lines long. That's a pretty easy one because we can all count to 14, so that's a pretty straightforward one. The rhyme scheme in this case works within each of the quatrains, which are lines of 4, right? Sort of these paragraphs here, which are made up of 2 sets of 2, or what we'd call couplets. So we have some terminology that we can use here. Each of the 4 sets would be a stanza, separated probably by a space here instead of like obviously a line like I've got. The quatrain is a set of 4 related lines, and then the couplet, right, is that set of 2, and there happens to be 2 of those which make up the 4. So I've color-coded and also used some lettering here to indicate the rhyme scheme, and you'll notice that oftentimes, especially with older poems, sometimes it's just a matter of pronunciation that gives us a weird-sounding rhyme, but it's also possible for poets to use what we call slant rhyme or off rhyme, words that kind of suggest or sound like each other, but aren't perfect rhymes like minds and finds. Right? The sounds are perfectly the same. Love, remove happens to be an off rhyme, at least as we would pronounce it, but that's not a rule. So as long as right, lines 1 and 3 rhyme, and then 2 and 4 rhyme, and notice that the rhyme scheme ends there and restarts with the next quatrain. So it's not like the 5th line has to rhyme with the 1st, or etc., etc. We kind of repeat that pattern of 4, but within each of the quatrains. So then we have mark, bark, shake and taken, 2 perfect rhymes. Cheeks, weeks, perfect, come, doom, sort of a off rhymey there. And then our final couplet, our set of 2, is a new rhyme with the G and the G, proved, loved. Again, maybe some pronunciation that might be different, but kind of an off rhyme or a slant rhyme. You don't have to worry about using off rhyme, slant rhyme, perfect rhyme. You can just have perfect rhymes throughout, right? So ignore the fact that Shakespeare sometimes uses what seem to us like these slant rhymes. That's not part of the rules. So 14 lines, following the rhyme scheme. That's all pretty straightforward, I think. Technically, if you see like a Shakespearean sonnet, they're actually built where the pieces or the parts, the quatrains, function almost like pieces of an essay would. So poems were used to put forth arguments or to elaborate ideas, much like we associate with essays now. And so I wouldn't worry too much about this, but you'll find that it happens kind of naturally. So the first quatrain lays out a premise, sort of like your introduction in your thesis almost. The second quatrain or second stanza here offers some variation, some development. We have the same thing in quatrain 3, almost like body paragraphs where you develop an idea. You don't really introduce a whole new premise, right, somewhere in the middle of your poem. And then we have kind of a conclusion here where we sum up the thing. So it's almost like we begin a little bit more generally, we dive down and kind of, right, explore that topic, and then we provide this more overarching conclusion. So you can try to use that quasi-essay format. You'll find that it almost happens naturally sometimes, but don't worry too much about that part of it. So, okay, 14 lines, rhyme scheme, the essay-ish format, and then I think, for my money, the hardest part of the iambic or the sonnet is that iambic pentameter. Everybody has probably heard the term, but now we're going to really dive in and figure out how it works. So the iamb is the metrical unit, or what's called the foot, sort of like the beat unit in the line, and because there's 5 of them, we have that penta part. So the iamb is this one da-da, right? Non-stressed plus stressed is an iamb, and then we have 5 of those. So, which alters when it alteration finds. It's sort of hard to see just like that, or even if I read it, even in a really awkward way. So I'm going to turn now to this particular example, the Edna St. Vincent Millay. Oddly enough, a more contemporary version of the sonnet than Shakespeare. And for my money, this line in particular, the very first one, is like the golden rule of how to do iambic pentameter. So we want 5 sets of that non-stressed and stressed together, not in the same word, but as a sort of unit across a single line. So it's not really counting syllables, which some people are taught, but that doesn't exactly work. It's more of a beat, an underlying beat that drives the poem forward. And if you listen to any good performer, right, read or perform a poem, even a Shakespeare one, they're never going to emphasize those stresses in the way that I'm going to here. So I'm doing it in a really artificial way so you can hear how the stresses work. And then you almost want to imagine, instead of trying to write towards those stresses, imagine there's just this constant beat going on underneath you writing, but where the stresses of your natural cadence would fall should be on those da 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 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So that 5 being the pentameter. So if we read this, what lips my lips have kissed and where and why, I can say that pretty naturally. But if you count along, right, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, what lips my lips have kissed and where and why. I'm literally counting on my fingers, and you can hear where the da 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 actually works. So you don't have to emphasize it when you would like read your sonnet and record it, but it's important as you're writing yours to really try for that iambic pentameter. I'm going to do one last thing here that's like super annoying, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to put us on a metronome. I'm more of a 88 beats per minute kind of a guy for the sonnet, just FYI. Okay, pretty annoying. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Imagine the rhythm under the poem as you write. I had to fake it there. What lips my lips have kissed and where and why. And then it just goes on and on and on and on and on. I'll turn that off. So one of the tricks then is to make sure that this first word in your poem is unstressed, which is kind of unnatural because honestly, if this were a creative writing class, I'd be teaching you to try to start with a stressed word, something that pops off the page, not some filler word. But the trick for starting a sonnet is that oftentimes to do it so that you get set up with the right set of unstressed, stressed syllables together, syllables together, is to start with a filler word like the, in this case, what, is, so, any of those little words that we really wouldn't stress when we were speaking a sentence, and so that the next word will then have the stress fall on it. So the time, the sun, the bike, the poem, the whatever, right? Da 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 da, the thing, the thing, the thing. Start with that filler word and you set yourself up to be more likely to get the line and the cadence correct.